further on the corner of Fry Street, is the Senator Fry's house.
On the corner, Main and Front.
Yes.
Yeah, that building is an apartment.
And yeah, it's an apartment house now.
Yeah.
And, you know, Colonel John M., that was his farm. And now it's, of course, where the students have converted, or developers have converted the houses to student living and so on. But all along Fry Street are buildings that the college owns.
You say Colonel Fry, was he involved in the War of 1812 or?
I think it was it was more a title, you know, one of those Kentucky colonels.
Maybe the local militia? Yeah, it could be the local militia.
Could have been a militia.
It may have been the local militia, that sort of thing.
They
may have been.
they were active, I've read about those, yeah.
So, okay, all right, we'll go.
Honestly,
I mentioned the railroads, so he's very early to support the railroads.
Oh, up there, okay. I was gonna say.
Oh, for the toll bridge?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, there's a sign for the toll bridge.
Yeah, you can pass on.
Okay, enough of that little in the Androscoggin Valley. Let's get back to his earlier career. For that, we found material in the archives of the Maine Historical Society, Bowdoin College, the Newburyport Public Library, the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, although I actually went to Peabody, Mass. Because they were renovating the museum, but they had it set up. Also, I used deeds and newspapers from the period. Now, Edward went to Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire, and then to Dartmouth College, class of 1797. So he arrived his freshman year to this campus of Dartmouth in Hanover, New Hampshire. And there have recently been constructed this building for housing the students and for classes as well. And these boys are playing cricket. So Edward Little may have played cricket. There's no evidence. They didn't have much at Dartmouth about him, but so we have to think, well, maybe they played cricket. It's really quite contemporary with his stay there. And incidentally, Dartmouth claims this is the first picture of anyone playing cricket in the United States. They're claiming some fame there. And I got this from the Robert Special Collections Library. Edward then qualified as a lawyer, and he also engaged in several business investments, including shipping, as well as a bookstore that stocked several books, of course, as well as associated articles. They also sold lottery tickets in the store. For funding of a bridge, for example, they would sell lottery tickets. And so the profits from the lottery were devoted to building the bridge. And so he sold lottery tickets. He also ran a publishing house that specialized in maritime charts. Newburyport is a seaport town, and he specialized in publishing these maritime charts and government documents. He was able to, maybe because of his father's influence, But he also was a state legislator for 3 terms, so, but that was, he had an in, I guess. As I said, he engaged in political activities. He became a member of the school committee, the board of selectmen, and he served 3 one-year terms in the Massachusetts legislature. And while he was active in Newburyport as a politician, he was part of the building committee for the Newburyport courthouse, which is still in existence. That's my picture. I took a picture of it. And it's the oldest building in the United States devoted to court proceedings, and still devoted to courts. And it was on the National Register. So Edward and his friends did a good job, although of course they were not building the bricks and so forth, but they were the building committee, and so they're, this is the so-called frog pond. It's what Newburyport still calls it. And we'll see it on another map later on. Edward was a member of the Federalist Party, which was very strong in New England generally. When Jefferson and Madison, who were the Democratic Republicans, the alternative party, when they embarked on an embargo in the years leading up to the War of 1812, Edward, along with all the other people in Newburyport and all the towns in this area, was a very strong opponent of the embargo. And this embargo impacted the shipping business of Newburyport, impacted him directly because his sales of maritime charts went down. So he had personal interest in what happened nationally. This led to threats of secession by New England from the country, because it was a so-called Hartford Convention where people got together and decided this is what we need to do. He wasn't involved in that directly, but he was certainly sympathetic. He wasn't involved directly because he had moved to Portland by the Hartford Convention. So he was removed from the hotbed of Essex County politics. Although Portland too would be concerned about the embargo. Moreover, he published this poem in one of his bookstore ads. And one of the things he did was advertising were political tracts, sale of speeches and so forth of people who were opposed to the Jeffersonians or opposed to Madison's war. And so I have Madison here, but this was Madison's war and was unjustified, et cetera, et cetera. But then a second disaster, this was the first disaster, was this embargo and then the war. The Newburyport fire of 1811. Edward's bookstore and publishing house were on Market Square, his Market Square. This is the area of the fire. And so he lost his publishing house and bookstore. His house was on Green Street, so that wasn't affected. Here's the frog pond and the courthouse. Although I think this is the old courthouse, which was replaced by, in terms of the map. they used an old map and superimposed the fire area on it. But the result of those two disasters resulted in a debt of, for Edward, of $30,000. And given inflation, I went to the inflation calculator on the internet, and it came up with $438,000. That's the extent of the debt that Edward suffered because of these twin disasters. As a result, Edward became deeply in his father's debt. That is, his father signed off on all kinds of, as a surety for all kinds of borrowing that Edward made here and there and everywhere, often from family members. You know, they were all fairly rich people, some of them better off, but he had more of a problem. You know, if they were in Newbury and so on, they weren't they might be affected by the embargo, but not by this fire. So Edward, in fact, almost was put in debtor's prison. And he had, there are these, you read it in the book, these anxiety-ridden pleas to his father to find, because this was in Boston that somehow he got caught up and the sheriff had taken him to prison. His father was in Essex County, and so they had to find people in, I've forgotten the name of the county, what Boston is in, but find people in that county to vouch for him and to put up their own resources to cover the particular debt for which he was arrested. And so ultimately, it wasn't clear as to how it got resolved. It got resolved, so he didn't have to stay overnight in prison. But he was deeply in his father's debt as a result of this. So this is why he went to work for his father in his father's investments, as well as for the Projectska proprietors. So he became the lawyer for Projectska proprietors and for his father, and he became the manager of his father's lands in the Androscoggin Valley.
Is this starting shortly after 1811, say in 1812, when he worked for Josiah?
Yeah, it was just pretty much immediately. He had these debts all of a sudden. So he became, and then so it was 1812, 1813, and on to 1830. Ultimately, he moved to Portland in 1814, January of 1814. So that's because he had to get, well, it became, he would come up through, say, Lewiston or the surrounding area, and he'd have to stay here for many days and weeks, sometimes, to manage these affairs. So he thought, well, and his family is in Newburyport. There's his family. His family is in Newburyport, and the last one is 1813. And his wife has to manage all these kids, although several of them did die in infancy. But Hannah Brown had to manage these kids, and sometimes they get sick. And so occasionally I ran across letters where she was writing to him up here in Lewiston, I'll say Lewiston. But her problems were or she would be writing to a sister and indicate what some of the illnesses that the kids had and so on. So note that several of the kids did die. There were 5 that survived to adulthood and got married and had children. One did, okay, well, I think it was one of the, well, anyway,
It's an interesting pattern there, because you have Sarah, who was born, she died at 8 years old or 7 years old, and then another child, girl was born a year after, she gets
she
named
gets named
Sarah.
Sarah.
And then you have 2 Moseses.
And then 2 Moses,
Yeah.
yeah. And then Edward Toppin,
Uh-huh.
so Edward Toppin was
Right.
also,
Yeah.
died very soon, and then, Edward Toppin, he survived, so on. So there were 5, there were, Thomas Brown Little, Josiah Little, Sarah, no, not that Sarah, Hannah, she married Samuel Pickard, I mentioned Samuel Pickard. And then,
11-year-old.
then Edward Toppin, and then Sarah born Charles, she married Charles Clark.
1894.
Okay, so they decided all to move to Portland, so they could be home a little more. Still, you have him traveling around the countryside here, and remember the roads are very rough, and he's going by horseback or later years. Well, that's after he settles here. He's going by stage, but Hannah had a difficult time, and she was by this time beginning to have her own health problems, and but she died around 1827 here in